Hi, KF4DBK here with my Gauss gun prototype. I built this about 13 years ago. At that time there were several amateurs working on Gauss guns just for fun and education on the internet. And the problem I had with a lot of their circuits is that they were just too complex. I remember one guy had multi-stage Gauss gun planned for his first Gauss gun that had optoelectronic sensors that would trigger multiple capacitors and capacitor banks to kick in when the projectile reached certain points. And of course, when he tried to implement this, timing was an issue, and it was turned into a real nightmare. And then another guy used a metallic barrel for the solenoid that launches the projectile. And of course, that it was an aluminum barrel, and it's still vulnerable to eddy currents when the coil becomes an electromagnet. Right now, the cap bank is charging, and the one I'm speaking of here is a photo flash array. And photo flash electrolytics are good at withstanding sudden discharge in the CEMF, the counter electromotive force that can actually reverse charge these things. I used to try and use ferrite on the power supply rails, but it just didn't seem to cut it. But my idea for a Gauss gun was based around the KISS principle of keep it simple, stupid. And one night I was trying to go to sleep, and I couldn't stop thinking about ideas, and what I came up with was a question. I thought, well, what if I took a 35mm camera photo flash unit, removed the xenon flash tube, and just added a coil? And so I got out of bed and worked until I had it. I worked all night, I think, on taking apart a camera flash unit that I already had and winding a coil of magnet wire. And after I finished, well, of course, I didn't have a nice SCR subassembly with which to switch, so I just had two steel balls and some high voltage wire and rubber gloves, and I just switched the thing by hand, to the tune of a shower of sparks and a ton of loss in the form of vaporization and heat. But the slug, scooted out of the barrel and slid across my table about 2 or 3 feet, if I recall correctly. Okay, let's see, we're up to around getting close to 300 volts. So I've got a small tack sitting here. We're going to see if that sticks in the target. It's just a block of balsa wood with an old broken telegraph key base behind it. And I should show you the schematic. It's very simple. It doesn't even have the hold on, I need this to try and focus for me. Okay, see if I can do this without shaking the camera. Now the subassembly that you see on the bottom is the network that supplies the pulse to the SCR. Silicon controlled rectifier is what I use to switch with now. I've got a stud mounted bolt type that can take quite a bit of current. I don't think I got a data sheet with this one. I couldn't find it. Let's see. Speaking of silicon controlled rectifiers, I have another one. I do have the data sheet for this, but it's been so many years since I looked at it. This is a hockey puck SCR. I think it's good for around 900 amps or a kiloamp of current. So, this was slated for future Gauss gun projects, which have not and never did come to fruition. But maybe they will in the future. So, who knows? So, looks like the inverter I'm using today is pretty weak. It's just from one camera. Okay, the neon light is now lit, saying that it thinks the capacitor bank is charged to full capacity. Although with larger inverters I've been able to go ahead and charge them to 350 volts. But the cap bank is 1,920 microfarads. at 330 volts. So it's capable of 105 joule discharge, if I remember correctly. 105 joules of energy. Not many of those make it to the particle. I mean, I'm sorry, to the, in our case, to the tack. The projectile is what I mean to say. But very simple circuit, you know. You have a power inverter rails coming in, capacitor bank here, something to switch it here, and then it just switches into the coil, and the projectile goes this way. So you can't get any simpler than this, and I've managed to fire a projectile through a soft drink, aluminum soft drink can before, although I did have to have a ballast, like a heavy object sitting on top of the can. So with 105 joules, I did break the soda can barrier, which was something we used to try for in those days. Let's go ahead and fire this. Okay. Get a good angle. Make sure my hands are nowhere near the circuit. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So we've had a low impedance jumper failure. Okay. Had some oxidation on that alligator clip. Had to think about this for a second. First thing I'm going to do is disable the inverter. I'll just 126 volts. I don't want to dry fire it, but I noticed that we did hit the target. Regardless of all, I mean, in spite of all that loss, the target was struck. So I don't feel so bad since I haven't touched this, and I think I had a date written on the top of the Tupperware I was storing all these modules in, and I believe the date was sometime in 04 is the last time I touched this. So go ahead and muzzle load one more slug in there. Now this is a section of I believe a 9 penny or a 16, I can't remember what gauge nail this is. I'm sure many of you will recognize it, but we're going to go ahead and fire this at 125.3 volts. See how fast it moves. Interesting. So you notice the cap bank was negatively charged some from the CEMF. And now it looks like it's recharging itself a little bit. But the inverter is off at this point. Yeah, the voltage is still going up a bit on that capacitor bank, but it's only at 2 volts, so we're safe now to poke around with the circuit. But you know, I make it a habit not to do that until everything's disassembled and discharged. So my finger on the SCR, we drain the cap bank again. Of course, I've got the flute reading directly off of the rails. We can do a better verification for safety without the camera, that is. Well, maybe we can do it with the camera. Okay, so the cap bank is neutral. It's safe. So that's my Gauss gun. With a better power inverter, it's going to be more impressive. And when I get my oscilloscope, I want to do a study of actually the length, the pulse time. I want to, and if my scope has enough bandwidth to measure, I want to see the CEMF get reflected, you know, the counter EMF occur, and the reversal of the reverse charge of the cap bank. So like I said, photo flash capacitors are better at this kind of thing than just any old electrolytic, which very well could give up its smoke or explode catastrophically, making a crater in your desk or your lab floor. So yeah, high current experimentation is not for everyone. It's potentially even more dangerous than high voltage. So don't follow along with this any of this kind of stuff unless you have the knowledge to have any business fooling with it. But like many of my projects, this one's modular. I don't really make finished products. Once I get to the proof of concept stage, I usually reach catharsis. I'm usually happy. Okay, I did this, it works. You know, I like the way it works, but these days I kind of want to go back and do, you know, get more nitpicky and do some quantification and some more measurement. And when my new scope gets here, I'll be able to find out how optimized this thing really is, and I'll probably find out that it is not extremely efficient. But it certainly was educational.